wondering how I got into this mix.
Hey, what's up, friends? This is Derek Rose with the Conscious Resistance Network. Today is Monday, July 2nd, and I am home back in Houston, home from the Midwest and Texas portions of the Liberate Your Mind tour, our latest national tour spreading consciousness, meditation, conscious music, agorism, anarchism, self-ownership, and lots of knowledge on a variety of topics. And of course, all of this is possible thanks to Bitcoin.com, who's been a big help working with us for the second year in a row, covering our costs, allowing us to travel the country, spreading the message of decentralization, localization, spiritual and personal empowerment, as well as those concepts of anarchism, what I call holistic anarchism. So now that I'm home from the Texas and Midwest portions of the Liberate Your Mind tour, I'm preparing for the West Coast and East Coast coming up in the next couple months. If you haven't checked out the dates, do so at theconsciousresistance.com/liberate. And I wanted to talk to you guys briefly, for those who are planning on seeing us later on this year, or those who've already seen us, or maybe those who've missed us on the road. I wanted to give you a little bit of preview of what the Liberate Your Mind tour presentation is about. If you've seen any of the social media promotion, you've seen that I've been promoting this as a brand new speech from myself. And this is nothing that I've talked about before. Of course, I discuss freedom cells, I discuss holistic anarchism, I discuss agorism, and some of the topics I've touched on over the years. But this presentation is something brand new, what I've been calling the pyramid of power. So I've been researching for almost a decade now, researching how government works, researching the people who work behind governments and corporations, various non-governmental organizations and institutions, individuals, think tanks, all the different power players that make up the state and the other institutions that keep us from being truly liberated, both in the mental, psychological sense, as well as the spiritual, personal sense, and in the physical world. And after doing this research, and both as just a researcher and as a journalist, and just as a human being, I have come to the conclusions which drive me every day. The conclusion, for one, being that government is violence, and that it's not only just the institution and the sort of philosophical concept of the state that is violent, but the fact that the people behind these institutions, the people who are working with government, working within corporations, and all the various mechanisms that I cover in this presentation, that those people represent the truest threat to our liberties and to our freedoms, right? So even though I've been researching for nearly a decade now, I've been an active activist for about 9 years, journalist for going on 6 years, I have never put together a documentary or an article or an essay or any sort of presentation that covered all of my findings, right? This is the culmination of everything I've ever researched, sort of thing. And as I was preparing for this next phase of the tour, I wanted to do something different. Last year was the Decentralize Your Life tour. We talked about decentralization, a lot of concepts, crypto, agorism, anarchism, that are very familiar to my audience and for those who follow my work. This is, it wasn't necessarily brand new information, but it was important information. This year, I wanted to talk about something that was new to my presentation. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other researchers out there. There's lots of documentaries and books and YouTube videos and great works out there that have exposed much of this various pyramid of power and the different influences that affect our life. So it's been done before by some, but it's never been done before by me, and I realized that I have something to say. That although I have become known for focusing on solutions, specifically agorism, opting out, counter-economics, vacating the state, not putting your spiritual energy and your time and your money and yourself into the institutions that don't serve you and that don't represent what you want to see in the world. Now that's important, and that's why I focused on it, but I've started to think and really understand that maybe if people don't really understand how fucked up the situation is, how corrupt the government is, how much control exists in our world, how deep the rabbit hole goes, maybe if you don't recognize that, then the solutions might not seem so relevant or important to you. For example, if you don't know how much companies like Monsanto and Bayer now and Syngenta and these other biotech companies have control of the food supply and revolving door relationships with the government, if you don't understand that, and you don't understand how unsustainable and destructive the current centralized food production system, which is subsidized via the state, via statism, If you don't understand those things, then perhaps when I'm talking to you about the value and importance of community gardening, backyard gardening, front yard gardening, just learning to take care of yourself and grow your own food, or at least support those locally who are growing their own food in healthy, pesticide-free ways, that might just sound like some sort of silly, trite thing, like, okay, that's cool, it's a novel idea, yeah, maybe one day I'll get around to starting a backyard garden, because you don't realize how important that is. So I decided, since I've focused so much on the solutions throughout my activism career, for this tour, I'm going to talk about the problems. And this brings me to the presentation of what I'm calling the Pyramid of Power. And I'd like to give you a brief introduction to this to let you guys know what you can expect from the tour. And if you've already missed it or the tour already came past, I'll tell you this. We do have a couple recorded versions of my speech. I think it's getting better as time goes on. This is an hour-and-a-half presentation. It's actually closer to 2 hours when I don't have to rush, and maybe even 3 hours if I was to really go in depth. So this is not just some light material to digest on your work break. This is something that you want to sit down and take notes on. And along the tour, I've actually been passing out my sources, passing out a sheet of paper that's double-sided, and it has book recommendations, documentary recommendations, and it sends people towards the information that I'm talking about in the presentation, because I cover a lot of different things, and I want people to not blindly swallow what I say, but to take my words and to go do the research for themselves. And also, as a journalist, I want to source the things I'm talking about, and I think that's really important. So I make sure people know what I'm referencing, what books, what people, what events and things like that. And so that's all part of this presentation about the Pyramid of Power. Now, I'll describe to you briefly what this is about, and then we'll talk about the solutions that I present. So first of all, I describe big pharma, the pharmaceutical industry, right? Then we move into state education, the mainstream education system. We talk about the corporate media. We also talk about the oligarchy. We also talk about big agriculture, the biotech industry that I just mentioned a moment ago. Then we take a step up on this pyramid and we start looking at the military-industrial complex. We start looking at the non-profit industrial complex, non-governmental organizations and think tanks and academia that also affect our world despite not being in governmental positions. We look at the prison industrial complex, right? Then we move up and we look at various organizations like banks, religious institutions, of course, corporations and government, and we look at and we ask, what are those institutions, what role do they play, and do they keep us from being truly liberated in different ways and different levels of our life? And then we move up to the top of the pyramid. And I will say this, for this presentation, I'm not focused on trying to pinpoint and say, these are the one group of people or person or individual or organizations that are at the top of this pyramid. There are plenty of researchers out there who have tried to do that, and I think some can say they know for certain who's at the top of the pyramid. I doubt that any of us really know. So my goal is not to try to say, and this is who's at the top, but more to describe the infrastructure that creates that pyramid, that those people at the top, whoever that we want to call them, I call them psychopaths, are willing to use that infrastructure in the pyramid below them for their own benefits. And of course, underneath this whole pyramid is the people themselves. But as we step up the pyramid from looking at big pharma and agriculture and media and state education to the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, the banks, the corporations, the government, etc., before you get to that top of the pyramid, I think there's a thin line there, which is really what allows all this to happen, and that is the belief in authority itself. So all of these institutions are allowed to operate and to continue to do the horrible things that they contribute to because we give them power. Because you watch TV and you blindly accept that because somebody's got nice hair and they're in a suit that you can trust them. Because a doctor hands you a pill and says this is what's best for you and your health and your family, you trust them because they're wearing a lab coat or because they have a degree on the wall, and so you assume that they must have researched this information, or because somebody is a professor at a university, or because they're a politician or a president or any of these things. Those are titles. It's part of credentialism. It doesn't mean that there aren't people who have knowledge that we should look towards and learn from. But when we start blindly trusting, we give away our own power. And that is what allows this entire pyramid of power to continue to function and exist. And after I spend about an hour and a half talking about all that and really getting in depth with what those institutions are and what role they play, we move towards solutions. And of course, my solutions are things like my holistic self-assessment that I released just a couple months ago, agorism, counter-economics, opting out of the system. I also describe a couple other ways. I think that we can opt out of these systems, we can opt into ourselves, we can detox both maybe physical senses, sort of cleansing and things like that, and maybe also in a sort of spiritual sense, time in nature, getting away from this system, unplugging from social media. We can decentralize, and we can localize, and we can create and build new systems and new alternatives to the current current options that we have. So that's just kind of a rough, very short preview of a 2-hour presentation that I'm giving this summer and fall in the East Coast as part of the Liberate Your Mind tour. So the solutions, of course, that's decentralization, like cryptocurrency, independent media, local food production. There's so many solutions out there, right? But I really, really want to emphasize the problems for a minute. And that's what this presentation is about. It's pretty in-depth, it's pretty intense, but so far I've been getting some really good responses, and people have been saying, that was a lot of information, but I don't feel overwhelmed. Thank you for, taking that big picture and then bringing it down to this digestible presentation. So I'm happy with the way I've been presenting it. I imagine it'll get better and better as I move my way throughout the tour, and I do have plans. At the end of this tour, I'm going to record this entire presentation with very good audio in a studio. I'm going to probably expand upon it further, and we're going to turn this into a documentary that will look at all the institutions that stand in the way of humanity truly being liberated. We'll describe this pyramid of power, and then we'll go into the solutions for each area and how we can opt out of those systems and what we can do for our own lives. So please stay tuned to this channel. I know that, if you're not aware, I will be talking about this in another video, but if you're not aware, social media is really kicking the crap out of independent media right now, and we are dying. There's so many independent websites that are shutting down or ending original reporting, and social media reach is really being killed via Facebook and other platforms. So if you want to stay in touch with me, I highly recommend you subscribe to my text list. This will give you updates directly to your phone whenever I release new videos or new articles or essays and what have you. So if you're interested in that, check the link below. And of course, try to subscribe to our channels. Hopefully they don't unsubscribe you, and that you actually get the notifications. In the meantime, thank you guys for all that you're doing in the world. I hope you are working on yourself, working to heal, and working to change the world around you by being the best that you can be and by opening the minds of your brothers and sisters. I'll see you guys on the road in a couple of weeks. For now, I'm home, and I'll be putting out a lot more content. Thank you so much for always supporting me. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.